Good morning, ladies. Shavua Tov Mevorach to everyone. Today, the 21st day of the month of Kislev, corresponding to the 4th of December 2023. Today's class dedicated for the Refuah Shelema of Yaacov ben Sara, Yada Kasava Kohen ben Faide, Eliyahu ben Simcha, and the safe return of Romi Bat Meirav. She's still in captivity? Okay, so we hope and pray that Be'ezat Hashem, very soon she will be reunited with her family, together with all the hostages, and for the well-being and safety of our brethren in Eretz Israel. So last week's Mishnah, we left on Mishnah 25, chapter 4 of the Pirkei Avot, and we come across someone by the name of Elisha ben Abuya. This is a bittersweet type of introduction because Elisha ben Abuya in his younger life was a great man. Just for us to understand who he was a student of Hillel. One of his teachers was Nahum Ish Gamzu. One of his habrutot was Rabbi Akiva. And one of his foremost student was Rabbi Meir Ba'alanes. But he turned against godliness, against Torah, and Irat Shamayim. And he committed, the way we can say, some of the worst sins that a Jew can ever do in their life. And the question is, what happened? How could it be someone that has such an illustrious background, who lived during the time of the Bet HaMikdash? And I'd like to add one more thing. When they made a census in the courtyard of the Bet HaMikdash, he was one of the elite members of the Jewish people that will be given the opportunity to give a public speech in the Bet HaMikdash. Does it say enough about him? Unbelievable. What happened? Listen to this. The Gemara writes, Arba'a nichnesu lapardes. They were four great righteous men, Tzaddikim, who entered to the Pardes. Although the word Pardes means a field, let's call it, but Pardes, Kabbalistically speaking, is the entering into, let's call it, a dimension above and beyond physical life. In the world of Torah learning, Pardes is actually an acronym that goes Peshat, Remez, Darush, Sod. Peshat means basic understanding of the text. Remez, hint. Darush, explanations. And Sod, the secrets. The Gemara tells us four great men entered. Two are known and very famous, Elisha ben Abuya and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva from the four was the one that entered in peace and came out in peace. Elisha ben Abuya, nichnas beshalom, entered good, predisposed for goodness, yatsa letarbut ra'a. When he came back, he turned. One came in but came out crazy, and the other one was a one-way ticket, never came out. Now, we don't really understand what I'm saying because we are humans, and as humans we have limited understanding. But there is a very, let's call it a deep concept in Torah learning known as Ma'aseh HaMerkabah. Ma'aseh HaMerkabah means in a simple way, how Hashem runs the world and how God's transportation in Shamayim works. Do we understand any of this? Not really, but it's fine. Comes the Gemara and it says that because of his change, the rabbis removed the title from this rabbi and they call him Aher, the other one. They did not give him the title and honor that he deserved. Although we have Mishnayot in Pirkei Avot and Gemarot, but apparently this happened before he turned. Yet, Rabbi Meir Baal Hanes, says the Gemara, Lo hadal lakachat Torah mipiv. Despite all the ideals what Elisha ben Abuya had, nevertheless, Rabbi Meir Baal Hanes continue absorbing Torah from him. But the rabbis were not happy with Rabbi Meir Baal Hanes neither. They said, Shmek nishkit, doesn't smell right. If he already is turning against godliness, how can you learn Torah from him? It's like you learn Torah from the Pope or from an imam that teaches Quran. And you say, I'm Avdil, I'm going to go to the Parashah class by Muhammad Abu Ali. Arfo? Abu Ali, big shot in Arabic. Correct? Amru Hachamim. Rabbi Meir Rimon Matzah. Rabbi Meir found a pomegranate. Tocho achal uklipato zarak. What Rabbi Meir says? I'm only taking the sweet fruit of the pomegranate. The peel goes out in the garbage can. But in a more deeper level, it says that Rabbi Meir Baal Hanes figured, if everybody is scolding and rebuking Elisha ben Abuya, so the chances for him to repent and to do teshuvah are zero. What did he do, Rabbi Meir? Kiva sheya'ale beyado lehaziro lemutav. Rabbi Meir says, I like to try. Maybe I'm able to influence him. Comes and it says, what happened at the end of the life of Elisha ben Abuya? The Talmud Yerushalmi writes, Rabbi Meir Baal Hanes came to visit him and speak to the heart. And it says, do teshuvah. Now, we're not blaming Elisha ben Abuya. In what sense? Maybe this journey of the Spirit was too much for him. It's like somebody walks out of the street and it says, I'm looking for a Torah class in Kabbalah. People do this, by the way. You know what the Gemara says? Before you have dessert, you have to start with an appetizer. Then from the appetizer, you go to the main course. And after the main course, once you're halfway satisfied, you eat dessert. And don't tell me that you have no room for dessert. The Gemara writes in Pesachim, there is always room for dessert. It's true. What dessert is the Gemara referring to? Afikoman in the night of Pesach. The afikoman is the dessert, because after the afikoman, we're not allowed to eat any other food. You can drink, but you cannot eat. So a person may say, oh, I ate so much masa and haroset and whatever sa'udah of Yom Tov you have, I have no room for the afikoman. The Gemara says there is always room for dessert. So what happens? Rabbi Meir pays the visit to Elisha ben Abuya, and Elisha says, I know that I did wrong, and out of respect of the ladies in front of me and the neshama of Elisha, I'm not going to tell you the sins that he committed. Don't think too much. Be'im ashuv, he asked, Do you think if I do teshuvah, האם יקבלוני? Shamayim will welcome my teshuvah, or they will say to me, too late, you missed the opportunity? Amar lo Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir at that moment was inspired by chapter 90 of Tehillim that says, listen to the words, I read it in Hebrew and I'll translate. Tashe benosh adaka, batomer shubu bene adam. A person can do teshuvah even when it's in matzav anush. Anush means, yani the next phone call is Hevra Kadisha. I'm sorry to be so blunt. That's it. Khalas. The person any second. But Tomer and the heavenly voices, Shubu bene Adam. The light is on, you can do teshuvah, you're awake. עד דקדוקה של נפש מקבלים בתשובה. Shamayim waits till the last breath. At that moment, Elisha did teshuvah. Bacha. He cried out in the ways of forgiveness. Beniftar umet. He passed away that minute. Rabbi Meir was very happy, the Gemara says. Why? Mitoch teshuvah niftar Rabbi. Out of teshuvah, my teacher left the world. This is the introduction to the name of Elisha ben Abuya. If we don't go further into the Mishnah, I'm very happy because this was only the introduction. It gets even better. In this week's last Shabbat, 2 days ago, we find Yaacov Avinu meets his brother Esav. We must understand that whenever the Torah tells us a historical event, which is the bulk of Sefer Bereshit, the majority of Sefer Bereshit talks about stories. There are no mitzvot. Yeah, we speak about Berit Milah, which is an historical event, but later on in Perashat Tazria, the Torah gives me the mitzvah of the Berit Milah. Which other mitzvah we have in Sefer Bereshit? The mitzvah of the prohibition of eating Gid Hanasheh. I'll explain in a minute. Before we go there, the Pasuk tells us in the beginning of the Perashah that Yaakov Avinu was very afraid. Vayira Yaakov me'od vayeser lo. Rashi writes that Yaakov Avinu had two types of fear. One fear was Shema Yehareg. What will be with the Jewish people, his wife and children, if Esav kills him? This was fear number one. What's going to be the day after? Imagine, God forbid, Esav kills Yaakov. Now you have 4 widows plus 13 children, or 12 children, because Binyamin is born later in the same parasha. We have 11 boys plus Dinah. So Yaakov Avinu is thinking, what's going to be with my family? But the true fear of Yaakov Avinu wasn't only his biological children. It was the future of the Jewish people. If Esav gets rid of me, who is going to guide my children? This was fear number one of Yaakov. Fear number 2, Oshema Yaharog et Acherim. What if Yaakov kills Esav? What's going to be? Let me ask you a question. Like we learned in last week's class in the Mishnah. What happens if Yaakov kills Esav? Technically speaking, happiness and joy for some. But Yaakov Avinu doesn't agree with that statement. Yaakov Avinu says, hold on a minute. If I kill Esav, I'm going to have to deal with bigger problems later on in history. Why? I'm going to read again. I'm going to say, because I don't have the book in front of me, but I remember Rashi that says, Shema Yehareg et Aherim. Maybe he will kill others. Who is the enemy in front of Yaacov? How many people are Esav? No, Esav is one person. That he came with 400 mercenaries, that's a different story. But who is the confrontation now? Yaacov and Esav. So why Rashi says, maybe he's going to kill others? The Pasuk should have said, Rashi, maybe he's going to kill Esav. Okay, Yaakov is a nice fellow, and he has a brother, and he doesn't want to kill his brother. But Rashi didn't say that. Rashi says, maybe he's going to kill others. There were two Hachamim called in our Talmud by the name of Aher or Aherim. One of them was Elisha ben Abuya. Remember I told you before, the Gemara in Hagigah says, Kinuhu Hachamim Beshem Aher. The other one, yani, we don't even say his name. It's like if you have to say the name of Yoshke, what do you say? J.C. Penny. Okay? Think about it. J.C., you don't say Yeshu. You don't say Yoshke. You say J.C. Penny. People understand that. Okay? I've heard it in speeches, by the way. I didn't happen in the beginning. J.C. Penny, what is J.C. Penny paying a promotion? No, J.C. Penny Rashet Abot Yeshu. Now, who was the other one called by the name of Aherim? You have two chairs here. You can push them here. Put them next to you. Also by you. Bring it closer to you. Thank you. Who was the other rabbi called Aherim? You're talking too deep. You're talking Kabbalistic talk codes called Sitra Ahara. There is such a concept in Kabbalah writing, Sitra Ahara. The Ahara is the Aherim. But I'm going to tell you something that I think that Rabbi Mansour hinted the other night when he was here. If he did not say it, maybe some of the ladies heard it from my wife in the Sauda Shelishit La Shabbat. That, right? That Aherim was Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes. Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes was called Aherim. Now, why was he called Aherim? Long story. Because he wanted to create a revolution in the leadership of the Jewish world. And he was rebuked for that. Because he wanted to create a revolution. Sometimes people are well intended, but that doesn't mean that is the right thing or the needs that we have today. Every generation has its own needs. Every community has its own needs. But let's discuss the background of Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes. You'll be surprised. Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes was a descendant of Esav. You need to know this. Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes was a direct descendant from Esav. How? Very simple. Esav, Eliphaz, Agag, Haman, from Megillat Esther, was the great-grandson of Esav. The Pasuk says, Haman ben Hamedata Ha'agagi. Agag was the king of Amalek. Amalek was the grandson of Esav. So you have Esav, Eliphaz, Amalek, Agag, Haman. There were a couple of generations in between these names, but that's the lineage. Comes the Gemara, استنى شوية. Comes the Gemara and asks or mentions that God says there are two people that I have a debt of gratitude to them. One was called Paro, the king of Egypt. And the other one is called Haman. Why? Haman wanted to get rid of us. True. He was the teacher of Hitler. No questions. Direct descendants. But the reality is, the Gemara writes, that Haman's threats caused the Jewish people to turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Gemara writes it clearly. When we find trouble affecting the Jewish people, God sends decrees and enemies equal to Ahashverosh and Haman to wake us up. That's the reality of the Gemara in Masechet Ta'anit. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gozer alehem gezrotav shel Ahashverosh ve'Haman, the Puede Gemara writes. So God says, I owe Haman that he helped my children to do teshuvah. So what reward did God give to Haman? That his grandchildren converted to Judaism. מבני בני המן, הלומדים בישיבה בבני ברק. Understands? Now, let's go forward. Who was the forefather of Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes? The Roman emperor by the name of Nero. What the Parasha said last week? Esav hu Edom. What's the name of the Roman Empire in Torah language? Edom. So Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes is a direct descendant of Edom. That is a direct descendant of Esav. So Rashi says that Yaacov in his prophecy says, if I get rid of Haman today, I'm getting rid of Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes. And if Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes does not come to the picture of the world, say Kaddish on the Jewish people. The question is, why? Why? Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes was one. Well, we didn't have other righteous men and women that were able to protect the Jewish people. So we need to understand. I saw this in writing on Shabbat at home, that it says that Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes requested that prior to his passing, that the day that he needs to meet the Creator, he wants to be buried standing, not laying down. Any cemetery of the world you go to, what do you see? Laying down. You know, like you're sleeping in your bed. God forbid, don't go anywhere. Person sleeps in the coffin. Chas v'shalom. Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes buried standing up with his hands like this. That's what's written. Why? There were two stages of the life of Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes. The tough one and the soft one. The tough one was someone very strict, very demanding, an expectation that everyone should dance to the same music of the Torah. His wife woke him up one day, I don't mean physically, but spiritually, and she says to him, what are you going to achieve by being this way? You should be more softer. The Gemara tells a story that there were a couple of troublemakers that were bothering Rabbi Meir while going to the synagogue, while going to learn. And they bothered him so much that one day he says to himself, what's the purpose of being alive? They better off dying instead of living a life of trouble. The wife became aware and scolded her husband And she says to him, Rabbi Meir, is that what you wish for them? Why don't you pray for them to do teshuvah? And the Gemara tells us that Rabbi Meir listened to his wife. He prayed for them to do teshuvah, and they did teshuvah. The Gemara attributes a statement to Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes. The statement says concerning the misbehavior of the Jewish people, Ben kach uben kach banai hem. Rabbi Meir says, irrelevant of our behavior, we are the children of Hashem, which everything is divine providence. This was a Gemara that we learned today in the morning class, how God is not happy with the behavior of the Jewish people and comes to Ishak Avinu and he says to him, your children misbehaved. So Ishak Avinu says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, why? Because they misbehave, they are no longer your children? It's like your son comes back from school and brings a report card and he gets an F in math, and you tell your husband, your son got an F. Maybe it could be F of fantastic or failure, God forbid. So when he does good, he's your son. When he does wrong or he doesn't do good, he's not your son. To make a long story short, Ishak Avinu negotiated peace between God and the Jewish people. So Rashi writes that if Yaacov Avinu attempts to get rid of Esav, who is going to vouch for the well-being of the Jewish people? There were two incidents in our Tanakh that the same thing happened to. Number one, Moshe Rabbeinu. Remember the beginning of Sefer Shemot, when Moshe Rabbeinu sees that there is an Egyptian striking Mehila, a Jew, correct, an Egyptian striking a Jew. You know the story behind it, right? This Jew was married to a lady. This lady did not have a very good behavior, so to speak, and this Egyptian violated her. And for an Egyptian to eat bread with a Jew was something demeaning and below their level. So imagine worse situations. So once everything was discovered, this Egyptian says, I'm going to get rid of the Jew, of the husband. To make a long story short, Moshe Rabbeinu comes out to the rescue. But listen to Moshe Rabbeinu's action. The Pasuk says, Ba'ifen ko bako, vayar kien ish. Translation, it means Moshe Rabbeinu looked to the right, Moshe Rabbeinu looks to the left, and sees that there is no man. What do you mean? Video? Of course. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have a video camera, of eavesdropping in every step of the way. What is he looking for? Short answer, she'en ish Israel yetze mimenu. Moshe Rabbeinu saw from that day till the day the Mashiach comes that no descendant of this Egyptian ever will convert to Judaism. Moshe Rabbeinu says, if not Jewish people are coming, I'm not rewriting history. He is deserved to be executed because a Gentile who, forget about violating a Jewish lady, but a Gentile who raises the hand against a Jew, hayav mita. So worse violation. This was Moshe Rabbeinu. Fast forward, David HaMelech. At the end of the book of Shmuel, there is an incident that a great man curses King David. His name was Shimei ben Gera. He was a mega Talmid Chacham, a teacher of King Solomon. He wasn't a featherweight, But he makes an assessment of how many difficulties King David had throughout his life. David and Shaul. David Amnon Tamar. David Navala Carmeli. David Batsheva. David Uriah. David Avshalom. So Shimei ben Gera says, this is not a good person to be the king of Israel. So Shimei ben Gera one day sees King David and curses him. If you look in the book of Menachem, you'll see the curse that Shimei ben Gera gave King David. He called him Noef, Mamzer, Roseach, yani the worst accolades that you can give a human being. This is how Shimei cursed King David. Now, Shimei ben Gera was from the tribe of Binyamin. That was the competition. The first king was Shaul. The kingdom was removed from Shaul, given to David. Obviously, in the world of politics, that's how it works. Next to David, there was a warrior, a nice fellow, by the name of Abishai ben Seruya. He was the nephew of David. David HaMelech had a sister by the name of Seruya. Seruya was the name of the sister of King David. And he was a skilled warrior. He was able to kill a person without the person realizing that he's being killed. Can you understand that? No. But he had a GPS in his sword. It was a one-way attack. On the spot, the person, God forbid, died. So he tells King David, this fellow cursed you. And there are protocols. What does it mean? A person that mistreats a king, okay? Like cursing the king. Imagine calling the king Mamzer. God forbid. Or you call the king Roseach, murderer. The halakha is, the king is not allowed to forgive. A king cannot forgive. Parents forgive. Rabbis forgive. But it takes longer to get forgiveness from the rabbis than from a parent. A parent is immediately. Other people, 3 times. Rabbis, up to 1,000 times. Kings, no forgiveness. So technically, by the way that this individual cursed David, he should have been executed. But what King David says, don't touch him. You think he's cursing me? Hashem amar lo kalel, or kilel et David. God is delivering me a message through him. I mean, put yourself a minute in the shoes of King David. Somebody's calling you all these ugly names. And I did not give you even the translation what they mean. But believe me, take my word for it, nothing to be proud of. And yet David says, thank you God for sending me a message to Shimei ben Gera. And David HaMelech saves the life of Shimei ben Gera. What was the outcome of David saving Shimei ben Gera? Short answer. Esther and Mordechai were born. If David kills Shimei ben Gera that day, forget about the miracle of Purim. How do we learn this from? It's a pasuk in the Megillah. Ish Yehudi haya b'Shushan Abira. There was a Jew in Shushan. Ushmo Mordechai. His name was Mordechai. Ben Yair. Ben Shimei. ben Kish ish yemini. Let's go back. Ish yemini refers to Shaul, Mehila, Binyamin, thank you. The son of Yaacov, Binyamin. Kish was the father of Shaul. Shaul HaMelech, King Shaul, was called Shaul ben Kish. If they will call Shaul in an Ashkenazic synagogue, they will say, Ya'amot, Shaul ben Kish, Shlishi. That's how the name of Shaul was. Shaul ben Kish. Then Shimei ben Gera. Who was the forefather of Shimei ben Gera? The great grandson of Shimei? Mordechai and Esther. If David kills Shimei in that incident in the book of Shmuel, which is also brought in the book of Menachem, say Kaddish on the miracle of Purim. No miracle of Purim. Then Haman will be alive, but Mordechai and Esther will never be part of human history. This was the power of the Tzaddikim. You see how everything fits? It's all connected. We just need to have the password. Like a Wi-Fi. It's all connected. You use the guest, I use the main one. Okay? In a way, that's what happened with Elisha. That's what happened with Rabbi Meir, Baal HaNes. That's what happened with Moshe Rabbeinu. That's what happened with David HaMelech. And that's what happened with Esav. Sure, Esav had many and not good descendants, as we mentioned. But on the other hand, great tzaddikim also came from Esav. Now, there is much more to say on this topic, but I think that for today, I think that we cover a lot of ground. So let me just take advantage of the next few minutes and let's read maybe 2-3 sentences of the Mishnah that we discussed about Elisha ben Abuya. So on page 67, Elisha ben Abuya says, Halomed Yeled, one who learns Torah as a child. Okay, this is called Girsa de Yankuta. A child learns Torah when they are young. Lemahu dome. To what can he be compared? Ledeyo ketuba al neyar hadash. Like if you take a clean piece of paper and you take ink, you put these two elements together, the ink and the paper, what do you have? Beautiful writing. Why? Because the paper was never used. What does it mean? Whatever a child learns, the younger the child starts learning Torah, the easier and the faster the Torah gets absorbed by the brain. It's never too late. Even Rabbi Akiva. At what age Rabbi Akiva began to learn Torah? 40. You take any child from the father and son minyan, they know how to read. They know how to sing. They know the perashah. They know the singing, the prayers. Halomed Zaken, the one who studies Torah as an old person, meaning to say later on in life, Lemahu dome, to what had been compared? Lideyo ketuba al neyar mahuk. If you want to write in a paper that is smudged, yani you used it already, you erase, you're going to rewrite again. It's not the same quality of writing. So comes the footnote at the bottom, footnote 25, and it says, paper that is fresh returns the ink legibly and permanently. This is a lesson on a person's duty to learn Torah while he's young and his mind is fresh and receptive. This is the reason why the Pasuk in Tehillim says, Mipi olelim beyonekim misadat ha'oz leashbit oyev umitnakem. From the lips of the nursing babies and the toddlers, you establish the strength to defeat the enemy. The Gemara writes, let's say Mashiach comes now. Say amen. Good. Okay, we're expecting for that to happen already 2,000 years almost. And the week of Hanukkah, which is rapidly approaching, Be'ezat Hashem, this coming Thursday evening, it's an auspicious time because the concept of the Hanukkah has to do with the reestablishment of the services in the Bet HaMikdash. So that means that when Hanukkah comes, the potential of the miracle becomes reactivated. That's why we're going to say, Bayamim Ahem, Bazeman Hazeh. In those days, at this time. Means every time Hanukkah and Purim comes, the potential for miracles becomes reactivated. The Gemara says it. The Gemara writes, good things come through good people. Headaches come from people that they are a headache themselves. Don't take it personal. But that's what the Gemara writes. But the Gemara adds one more component that says that also days have this power. A good day is prone to bring good things. A dark day, the opposite. With that being said, in the beginning of today's class, I spoke about a word, a mitzvah rather, that is found in this week's parasha that we read on Shabbat, about the wrestling between Yaacov and the Malach of Esav. So the pasuk says as follows: Vayar ki lo yachol lo. This angel realized that he's not able to defeat Yaakov. Vaiga bechafierech yerecho. So what did he do? He dislocated the hip of Yaakov Avinu. And he affected Yaakov by the sciatic nerve. How many times people say pain in the sciatic nerve? Have you heard of that? Okay. Hashem should give everybody refuah shelema. But that's what the pasuk says. Therefore, the Torah says, don't eat that part of the animal. This is called, in the laws of kosher meat, nikur. Nikur, the deveining of the animal. In America, this concept does not apply because takana from the Hachamim in the United States for many generations, to avoid any halachic questions with haleb, with non-kosher fat, so the animal to the kosher industry is sold from the neck to the 11th rib, from the 11th going back 12 and the rear part of the animal is given to the goyim. That's why there is no loin in the kosher meat industry for this reason, filet mignon, etc. In Israel, they have a different concept. So in some slaughterhouses that they have skilled rabbis which are expert in deveining the animal and the removal of the non-kosher fat, they eat it. Now, the question is, why specifically this outcome from the wrestling match between Yaakov and the Malach? So, a few answers. Number one, that the pasuk says the Malach was not able to defeat Yaakov. Spiritually means when the Malach sees that Yaakov is so powerful, strong spiritually, he says, let me get the children. If I cannot take care of the father because the father is from the old school and has very strong foundation, let me capture the children. And that was the miracle of Hanukkah. When the Greeks came against the Jewish people, one of the first prohibitions that they enacted was the prohibition of teaching Torah to children. You know, kids play with a dreidel, sevivon, or they play with kugalach, Okay, for those who understand what I'm referring to. Okay, where this comes from the prohibition of Torah learning. They used to send soldiers to find teachers teaching Torah privately to Jewish children. And if God forbid somebody was caught teaching Torah, you can understand what will be the outcome. Another prohibition they enacted, the observance of Shabbat. Another prohibition was no milah. Another prohibition was no mikveh for the wife. Another prohibition was something related with immorality. With immorality and marriage. So people will not get married. Sure, if there was an act of immorality done the night before the wedding with the mayor of the town. So people did not get married. So they figure if they still get married, they're not going to go to the mikveh. They will not go to the mikveh. They will not be able to procreate. Another concept was not celebration of Rosh Chodesh, which is the holiday for the Jewish women. Another prohibition was an obligation to remove the doorpost of the homes, so there will not be a mezuzah. Why they established these prohibitions? Because they figured the last one who tried to destroy the body of the Jewish people failed. That was Haman. What was the plan of Haman? To eradicate, annihilate, evaporate, erase the Jewish people. He failed. Baruch Hashem. So they said, we're not going to make the same mistake. We're not going to go to the body of the Jewish people. We're going to go to the neshama of the Jewish people. If we are able to capture the soul, that's why one of the biggest challenges that the Jewish people needed to overcome during the time of the Greek invasion was assimilation. And when I mean assimilation, I don't mean only intermarriage. It was being Jewish by living like Goyim. If you have no kashrut, no mikveh, no milah, no Shabbat, no Rosh Chodesh, no mezuzah, what do you have? Send away the mother bird? Give a few coins in the kuppah? All these are important mitzvot. But this mitzvot that they selected, on top of that, the prohibition of Torah learning, they thought, and Baruch Hashem, they failed. Now, when was the struggle between Yaacov and this Malach? Short answer, says the Hatam Sofer, the night of Tisha B'Av. The famous Tisha B'Av that will become a nightmare for the Jewish people, with the stories of the spies first, and then destruction of the first temple, second temple, plus many calamities that afflicted the Jewish people throughout history, on and during the time of the Tisha B'Av time. The first Tisha B'Av was that night. And it says that the legs of Yaakov Avinu represented the first and second Bet HaMikdash. That was like a sneak preview of Tisha B'Av much later in history. That's why I'll finish with this. Let's see who I'm going to ask to be a volunteer. Rossi, do me a favor, please. Can you go to the office, go to Aline, tell her to give you maybe 40 guides of Hanukkah that they came from the printer, so you don't go empty-handed, because we're not going to see each other till Hanukkah. So I want you to take it with you now. But let me finish with this. It says the Moed Kol Hai that the Gid HaNasheh it's a representation of all of the fast days of the Jewish calendar. I explain. Let me give you this brief introduction. And don't ask me questions because I don't have the answer. I know you want to ask me a question on the following statement. Rabbi Chaim Palachi writes that every day of the calendar has a negative commandments that connects to that day. That's what he writes. Every day there is the mitzvah of the day. You go to a restaurant, they give you soup of the day. So there is something called the mitzvah of the day. Now, the mitzvah that connects to Tisha B'Av is the prohibition of eating Gid HaNasheh. That means that on Tisha B'Av we don't eat. But if a person eats on Tisha B'Av, not only unless it's halachically permissible, obviously, but let's say that a person has no health issues, no issue whatsoever, wants to eat, yani enkaye, he wants to eat dafka. Okay? Because it's like the person is eating Gid HaNasheh. And he explains. Et Gid, he says, the Aleph is for Ta'anit Esther. The Tav is for Tisha B'Av. The Gimal, which fast day happens to be on the third day of a month. Tzom Gedalia, the Gimal Tishrei after Rosh Hashanah. The Yod is Asara B'Tevet, the 10th of Tevet. And which fast day happens to be on the 4th month of the calendar? 17 of Tammuz. So it says here, Ed Gid Hashana. It says in these two words, besides Kippur, we have all the fast days of the Jewish calendar. Deep. Very deep. Maaseh Abot Siman Labbanim. The Gemara writes, the action of the parents are the guidelines for the children. Or you can give it out each one in person, yeah. That's what the Gemara writes at the end of Masechet Sukkah. Okay, while she is giving out, thank you so much for volunteering. Be'ezat Hashem, this coming Thursday evening is going to be the first night of Hanukkah. I'm looking to the audience that learns Torah on a regular basis, comes to shul, so they don't have to go over Hanukkah, but you have there the guide to just to refresh our mind to the special halachot which are applicable for Hanukkah. And remember that Hanukkah is also a holiday for the ladies. Why? Not only because some of the miracles of Hanukkah happen through the Jewish ladies, but some of the prohibitions that the Romans, Mehila, that the Greeks enacted against the Jewish people were directly geared to the sanctity of the Jewish women. So make sure to light the Hanukkah in a timely manner. It's a known fact that the 30 minutes that we hang around the candles are very holy and very propitious and auspicious times to pray. Pray for whatever you need. You are human, so usually humans have all kinds of needs. Physical, emotional, financial, spiritual, shidduchim, children, marriage, whatever it may be. We have a whole week to take advantage every night to pray. So, Be'ezat Hashem, and you can read Tehillim if you like to, or pray from your heart, or prepare before the holiday. Maybe a note, these are the things that I'm going to pray for. And I believe that there is even a list that each night of Hanukkah is propitious for different matters of life. Be'ezat Hashem, if I'm able to find it, I'll share it with you. But otherwise, let me wish everybody a Hanukkah Sameach. Yes, there it's written. There it's written how to proceed the Friday afternoon and Mosa'e Shabbat. A few minutes before the Shabbat candles, you should light the candles of Shabbat. on Mosai Shabbat you light the candles at home after Havdalah. All the halachot are in the guide. If for some reason you have a question and you don't see it, feel free to send me a message. Belly Nether next Monday. We are going to have a class, obviously in honor of Hanukkah. But in the meantime, I wish everybody Shavua Tov and happy Hanukkah, Hanukkah Sameach to everyone. Shavua Tov.